Megatron, the Joker, Skeletor, SpongeBob SquarePants? If you don't think everyone's favorite animated sea sponge belongs in this rogues gallery of some of the most depraved cartoon villains, then you're only half wrong. While he may not be a villain in the traditional sense of the word, SpongeBob's committed his fair share of serious crimes. Hi, I'm Vailskibum94 with Channel Frederator. Forget everything you thought you knew about SpongeBob, because today we're talking about 10 things he's done that would get him arrested in no time in the real world. Let's get arrested, started. Number 10. Breaking and entering. After making a new friend, you or I might try to go see a movie together or invite them over to play video games. In SpongeBob's case, not long after meeting Sandy Cheeks a mere season earlier, he breaks into her home uninvited. Harmless? Maybe. A serious crime? Absolutely. The break-in occurs in the episode Survival of the Idiots, when SpongeBob and Patrick enter Sandy's front door in spite of a keep out sign attached to it, and a video in her entryway explaining that she's hibernating, forbidding anyone, especially SpongeBob, from going inside. While hesitant at first, as soon as Patrick opens the door to the snowy interior of Sandy's treat home, SpongeBob can't help himself and enters. This is both a crime in our world and a pretty rude thing to do to a friend. In the grand scheme of things, breaking and entering is a minor offense compared to some of SpongeBob's more serious crimes. And believe me, he's committed some serious crimes. Since he didn't steal anything from Sandy's home, this would just be considered a misdemeanor, and SpongeBob would face a jail sentence of less than a year. Number 9. Grand Theft Auto. While Grand Theft Auto spawned one of the most successful video game series of all time, it's still totally a crime, and one of which SpongeBob SquarePants himself is guilty. As if impersonating a lifeguard isn't irresponsible enough, as soon as SpongeBob needs to put the pedal to the metal, pun intended, and save Patrick from drowning, he quickly resorts to stealing a vehicle right out from under its owner's noses. This happens in the season 3 episode Sponge Guard on Duty, when SpongeBob gets jealous of Larry the Lobster's lifeguarding job at Goo Lagoon, and attempts to do the job himself after being mistaken by Larry as a fellow lifeguard. Patrick's, butt starts to cramp. Hey, it could happen, and SpongeBob, being the lifeguard on duty, has to save him from drowning. Very ironically, given that the dude lives underwater, SpongeBob can't swim, so he gets out onto the lagoon by stealing a vehicle from a young couple innocently enjoying a hot dog in the parking lot. Party foul, dude, and also criminal. Grand Theft Auto can be either a misdemeanor or a felony depending on the circumstances of the crime and the defendant's criminal record. Minimum, SpongeBob would be looking at up to a year in prison for a misdemeanor, or up to 3 years for a felony, which is still, believe it or not, the tip of the iceberg when it comes to SpongeBob's crime-filled life. Number 8. Invasion of privacy. Like many new, powerful forms of technology, drones can both accomplish new and exciting things that were never before possible, like film really cool nature videos, or be used for some more nefarious purposes. Given his criminal proclivities, it's no surprise that, in the recent episode Whirly Brains, SpongeBob gets a drone that, for some weird reason, is also his own brain, and very quickly uses it for a criminal act, spying on a neighbor in the safety of his own bath. Yep, Peeping Bob. But back to the weird brain drone thing. In this episode, turning your brain into a drone is the coolest new toy on the market, so of course SpongeBob and Patrick want to try it out for themselves. As soon as they get them, one of the very first things they use them to do is fly into Squidward's home and spy on him during his bath time. While Squidward may be their friend of sorts, or so they believe, this is still a serious invasion of privacy. In California, where SpongeBob SquarePants is made, this actually falls under a specific set of laws called the Peeping Tom laws, which prohibit taking photos or videos of someone in an area where they expect privacy. In this case, while it's not a camera, but rather SpongeBob's actual eyes attached to his brain, the law still seems to apply to this situation. This would get SpongeBob up to 6 months in jail. Number 7. False advertising. Striking it rich takes lots of hard work. The only way to take a shortcut on the road to riches is to resort to criminal activity, which is just what SpongeBob does in an attempt to make bank as a chocolate entrepreneur in the episode Chocolate with Nuts. Initially, SpongeBob and Patrick try to make an honest living by selling candy bars with their own wit and charm. However, they can't even make one sale and end up losing money in the process to a con man whose wicked ways they soon adopt. This leads to a big fat lie claiming that chocolate can make a very shriveled old woman immortal, and lo and behold, they make their first sale. Inspired by this trickery, he and Patrick then pretend to be injured to sell more chocolate bars. Look, they learn their lesson by the end, but it still isn't right. Considering this would probably be SpongeBob's first conviction for false advertising, he he'd be looking at a jail sentence of up to 6 months, as well as a sizable fine of up to $5,000, which is way more than anyone, except for maybe Milton S. Hershey himself, could ever make selling chocolate bars. Number 6. Vehicular Assault. Poor Mrs. Puff. We could probably make a separate video of just crimes SpongeBob's committed against his driving instructor. However, in Demolition Doofus, this all reaches a culminating point when, in the middle of his driving test, SpongeBob crashes his car so many times and in so many different creative ways that he lands Mrs. Puff in the hospital, told by her doctor that she'll never be able to inflate again. It's one thing to crash a car with a passenger in it, which SpongeBob does plenty, but those are mostly the special cases where cartoon rules save anyone from being injured. But this time, SpongeBob critically injures his passenger, who happens to be the same passenger he's miraculously not injured numerous times before, thanks to those nifty cartoon rules, making this a far more serious and punishable offense. This is a case where the punishment is adjusted to the severity of the crime and can count as either a misdemeanor or a felony. Given that SpongeBob caused critical bodily injury to his victim, he's more likely to face felony charges, which could mean 1 or 2 years in jail. Okay, enough misdemeanors. Time to get into some of SpongeBob's truly serious offenses. Number 5. Discharging a destructive device. In the episode Dying for Pie, Squidward's lazy attempts at buying SpongeBob a gift for Employee Brotherhood Day, not a real holiday by the way, leads to him buying an explosive that looks like a pie. SpongeBob then comes into possession of the pie bomb, which, if you know anything about Chekhov's gun, is required by Russian playwright law to explode by the end of the episode, and explode it does. In the episode's final scene, Squidward thinks SpongeBob has already eaten the pie and is going to blow up as soon as it's digested. However, SpongeBob has pocketed the pie, but then, tripping over a rock, drops it and detonates it. The resulting explosion is so severe, the animators had to use footage of an actual nuclear explosion. It's unlikely there's an existing punishment fit for an explosion so serious it couldn't even be animated, meaning that if SpongeBob somehow survived, cartoon rules, right? He would probably get life in prison. However, setting off an explosive in general, even if nobody gets harmed, is a serious offense on its own. Discharging a destructive device alone would land SpongeBob up to 5 years in the slammer. Number 4. Kidnapping. If you're going to follow just one rule in life, let it be to never give a criminal a superhero belt full of magical gadgets. Seriously, this should be like rule number 1, because that's just what happens in Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy 4 when SpongeBob comes into possession of local retired superhero Mermaid Man's utility belt. Havoc very quickly ensues. After attempting and failing to return the belt to its rightful owner, SpongeBob starts playing around with its features and soon discovers it can shrink people down so small that they can fit in the palm of his hand. Unfortunately, the belt has no wombo feature and the effects can't be reversed. Instead of getting to the root of the problem the way a superhero would, SpongeBob shrinks down everybody in Bikini Bottom and, not knowing what to do with them, stores them in a small jar together, which is eventually packed to the brim with fish people held hostage. Kidnapping is a very serious offense. The crime of confining of a person to a controlled space would net SpongeBob 20 or more years in prison. So remember, if you shrink down everyone in your town, at least tell them to move freely. Number 3. Arson. In the episode The Krusty Plate, Mr. Krabs brings SpongeBob a dirty plate, forbidding him from leaving until the plate is entirely clean. SpongeBob warns Mr. Krabs that the last time he was left alone, the Krusty Krab burned down, and Mr. Krabs unwisely chooses not to heed this warning, leaving SpongeBob to his own devices again. What do you think happens next? A happy ending, or the exact thing SpongeBob warned him about? SpongeBob ends up resorting to a high-powered laser called the Spotmaster 6000 to clean the plate, eventually switching it to its most powerful setting, which is a laser made of steel wool. It at least sounds like an ideal way to clean a plate and not a recipe for disaster. However, the laser just won't cut it, and the resulting explosion reduces the Krusty Krab to rubble. Did you know an explosion can still constitute arson? It depends on the state, but property damage due to an explosion can still fall under the arson umbrella of crimes. SpongeBob would be looking at anywhere from 1 to 20 years in jail, but considering the restaurant went from something to absolutely nothing, his sentence might be on the higher end. Number 2. Poisoning. Cartoon restaurant owners never have a good relationship with health inspectors. Bob from Bob's Burgers and Mr. Krabs could probably find a lot of common ground in this regard. In Nasty Patty, when a health inspector pays a surprise visit to the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs, thinking he is an imposter, conspire to prank the health inspector with a burger that they make to be as disgusting as possible. The recipe includes seahorse radish, volcano hot sauce, toenail clippings, and dropping the burger in the toilet, then drying it with Mr. Krabs' gym socks. Pretty gross and would probably get you sick in real life. While the health inspector doesn't eat the burger, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs think he does, and even worse, that he's died from it. In reality, he just choked on a fly and passed out. but their reaction to his death is the worst part. Instead of calling an ambulance, they panic and start trying to hide his dead body. They attempt to bury the body at the top of a hill in a hole they dig, but 2 officers come and ruin their plans. They then hide the body in the cop's trunk, get a ride back to the Krusty Krab, and SpongeBob tries to stash the body in a freezer without them seeing. The cops question SpongeBob's behavior, and Mr. Krabs tries to distract them and bribe them with money. Eventually, the health inspector gains consciousness and gets out of the freezer, giving them their final inspection review, which is a pass. Hurrah! No murder took place, but they very much intended to serve the health inspector a meal that was not meant for fish person consumption, and was covered in hazardous toilet water, which is technically poisoning him, not to mention hiding evidence and bribing officers. But the poisoning alone is enough. In the state of California, maliciously administering poison can land you 15 years to life in prison. How is SpongeBob not one of America's most wanted by now? Number 1. Manslaughter. Yep. Just like Megatron and the Joker before him, SpongeBob has blood on his hands, and all because he ate a really gross sort of ice cream sundae. The episode Something Smelly begins with SpongeBob finding no ice cream in his house and making an ice cream sundae out of onions, ketchup, and a dead plant. Try not to imagine what that tastes like. This, of course, gives him bad breath, and while that's not a crime on its own, the people's death it causes constitutes one of the most serious crimes of all. First, a couple of fish people are so repulsed by his breath, they grab onto a 2-pronged hook and are pulled to the surface. If you've gone fishing before, or know what fishermen do, you know how that ends for them. Then, SpongeBob's breath somehow gets into a driver's eyes, causing his car to crash and explode into a charred frame, with his body nowhere to be found. We all know the punishment for murder is bad, but just how bad? Considering SpongeBob didn't intend to kill any of these 3 people, he would likely be charged with manslaughter, which constitutes causing another's death through reckless behavior without the intent to kill. For these deaths, SpongeBob would be looking at anywhere from 10 months to 4 years in prison. Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? A serious criminal who would be serving life behind bars if he were charged for all these crimes in real life. Fortunately, the inherent silliness behind the rules of his cartoon world mean that SpongeBob's gotten off scot-free for every single one of these and many other crimes he's committed. So, the show can continue with SpongeBob remaining a free sponge. I'm Vailskibum94, and thanks for watching 10 actions that would get SpongeBob arrested in real life. What do you think is the worst thing SpongeBob has done? Does he belong in prison? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad. Make sure to check out our other videos and subscribe to Channel Frederator, your cartoon central on the internet.